saved he was at that time. Oh, I love God, but if you get me mad enough, we'll do ungodly things. Peter was caught up in tradition that kept him from being transformed while he walked with Jesus. Jesus was trying to transform Peter, trying to learn something basically, but Peter was wrapped up in the here and the now. The same way you always do things. You mess with the master and I'll cut your ear off. Unlike Peter, Jesus was wrapped up in the things to come. Kingdom building business. And therefore, Jesus put the soldier's ear back on. What does it mean for someone to reject you? So what? Rejection is never ever supposed to knock you out of your character. You know how it goes. When you're in the inner circle, you get to hear things over and over again. That's the benefit of having the first-hand privilege of walking with Jesus. I am sure Jesus said over and over again to Peter, "Vengeance is mine. I will repay," said the Lord. The same inspiration that was later given to the Apostle Paul when he proclaimed, "Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good." I am sure the same inspiration given to Peter while he walked hand in hand with the Lord, when Peter rebuked Jesus for saying he was going away, Jesus had to set him straight, because Jesus knew the spirit of the devil that caused Peter to respond the way he did. A spirit that would later be transformed into a new creature in Christ. The old Peter would pass away and all his cussing and fussing would be praised and worshiped. Peter never intended to deny Jesus. However, he knew that his flesh was his worst enemy. He knew in his heart of hearts that his fear of the unknown would cause him to leave and forsake the Lord, the very thing that his Lord promised never to do to him. You see, my brothers and sisters, this Jesus that chose Peter out of darkness into the marvelous light knew that the cross, the crucifixion, would transform Peter and other disciples. Jesus knew the plan he had for Peter's life. Plans for his good and not his harm, to give him a future hope. Jesus knew when Peter identified him as the Christ, when he asked, "Who do you say I am?" that Peter would be the founder of the first mega church on the day of Pentecost. Not only did Jesus promise Peter a church that the gates of hell shall not prevail, he also promised him the keys of the kingdom of heaven, keys that represent a badge of power and authority. And for that reason, and that reason alone, Peter had to outlive the experience of pressing towards the mark of the high calling of God that is in Christ Jesus. My brothers and sisters, when you trust in God, it defies all reason. Peter could not see the greater purpose. He was caught up in himself, but the Spirit made intercession as Peter walked closely with Jesus. And the Spirit is ready, waiting, and willing to do the same thing for you and the same thing for me. Humbling ourselves to learn how to serve God's people taught Peter how to do things differently, how to shift from flying off the handle and telling people off to having patience and meeting people where they are. To pastor a mega church, he had to move away from tradition, and we never did that way before, but transform to I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me. One of the most difficult things that we, and I'm going to say we, as people we have trouble mastering, and that is knowing when to shut up, and knowing that God is God and that God is in absolute control. Sometimes, my brothers and sisters, we have to just shut up and let Jesus do the speaking to others about our situation and circumstances at hand. We have to just trust the process. In the text, Jesus' time to depart had arrived, and there was no need for the disciples to say another word. Now, my third point here, quit tripping. Jesus told Peter to put the sword away in verse 11 and stop tripping. He was saying to Peter, you will no longer do things the same way you used to. You will humble yourself and be patient as the fulfillment of prophecy manifests. All things will pass away, all things will become new. As the Apostle Paul called unto the Spirit and proclaimed, I am, we will be crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, he said, I live, yet not I, but Christ now liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. My brothers and sisters, we must be willing to become vulnerable before God and move out of our comfort zone of tradition. You know that we never did it this way before, and allow God to transform us as we become new creatures in Christ with the renewing of our minds. The change agent of tradition, the Apostle Paul, the one who was born in tradition and boldly challenged and opposed the tradition and then persecuted Christians in the name of tradition, challenges us to understand when he said, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. This, my brothers and sisters, is the Christian life and service for the glory of God. As an intimate relationship with God through Jesus Christ that moves you out of the comfort zone of tradition into a transformation beyond your imagination that will teach you how to serve with the love of God. To God be the glory. Amen.